in our seat. Think about how we can make those little subtle adjustments make an impact so that maybe we're not completely at ease. Maybe we're not completely satiated with the sensation of our feet, of our hips, of our spine, shoulders, neck. But can you make those little tiny shifts to make them just 1%, 5%, 10% better? We'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. Last big cycle of breath here. And complete that full inhale, exhale. Let the eyes open if they're closed. Bring the chin to a neutral point. And then imagine from the chin, there's like a smile shape extending out. So not quite a U, right? A very open U if you're imagining a U. And we're going to have the chin track that smile shape or very open U. So we come to the neutral point and then we roll out and roll up. And then we come back to the neutral point and then we go that opposite direction. So there's a rotational capacity. There's also a lift here. Pay attention to the unionization of the top of the cervical spine and the skull itself. So the base on which the skull is resting, and try to keep that area long. So we're not trying to create any compression there. And that's pretty hard to do as that top spinal column piece follows this rotation as the chin lifts. But think about extending the back of the head, even as you lift the chin, to create a little bit of separation there. We can just help out that blood flow at the brainstem. Maybe one more time in each direction. And eventually we'll come back to neutral and let the chin just fall. As the chin falls, now we have the reverse problem, right? There's a separation between the base of the skull and the top of the cervical spine on the posterior of the body, backside of the body. And now, even as the chin tucks, think about extending your forehead away from the sternum. And the likeliest manifestation of sensation is not actually at the brainstem space, but it is at the base, the bottom of the cervical spine, where the cervical spine and the thoracic spine connect. So chin is tucked, forehead is pushing away, two countering energetic forces. And we're trying to create some room for the operation of the cervical spine here. Head and neck, so they can move more freely. And then we'll bring our head back to neutral, squeeze the shoulder blades back, and just reassess the seated position that we've found ourselves in. And let's get a little bit of movement out of the way. So we'll transition to hands and knees tabletop. Start with the hands right underneath the shoulders here. Think about wrist, elbow, shoulder stacking, splay the fingers out, make sure the weight isn't in the base of the hands, and then sink back into child's pose. Fingertips pull us back forward. Will be a little bit dynamic here. Do that 3 more times, just exhaling back into child's pose and inhaling forward. Really think about maintaining that connection across the fingerprints and try to use that fingerprint connection to help you lengthen the anterior of the body here. So pushing all the way back into the tailbone depth. When you complete that third cycle, no rush to make that happen, absolutely at your own timeline. But when you do, we're going to walk the hands together, splaying the fingers out as wide as you can get them so that the thumbs can press together. So hands are together, but they're double thumb width apart. And from that, we're going to sink back into child's pose once again. Now, there's a little bit of a desire here for an internal rotation of the humeral head. So shoulders want to rotate in slightly. Really try to maintain neutrality there. You may note that there's a limitation in the depth that you can get your tailbone into the shape, depending on your mobility in the shoulder, stability around the shoulder capsule. You may not. And we'll do this 2 more times, exhaling back and inhaling forward. And then when you complete that second cycle, again, no rush, we're going to go pinkies out to the edge of the mat. Again, splay those fingers out wide so that the pinky is reaching as far as it can towards that lateral edge of your mat. And then slide back into child's pose. Now there's a little bit of a desire for an external rotation of the shoulder that manifests as a rise on that inner edge, medial edge of the humeral head. Again, think about neutrality. You'll be able to create neutrality if you can balance the energy in each fingerprint. That's why our fingerprints are the point of emphasis here, especially the point of emphasis here through this little child's pose sequence. And one more time forward, one more time back. When you complete that last cycle, hands just come back to a neutral alignment. And we are going to shift our weight forward maybe 5 to 10%. And as you do that, you'll note how as the wrist stacks on the hand, all of the weight wants to dump into the heels of the hands. Try to bring up those middle knuckles and really push down into the fingerprints. So the fingerprints are fully anchored. You may feel some hand musculature start to work as those metacarpal start to spread out more with the energy of the weight. And then we'll shift back to neutral, slide back into child's pose, and slide your hands back to your heels here. This is actually more of a recharge, rejuvenation for the hands than it is for the shoulders. I typically use the hands to the heels, child's pose as a shoulder relaxation, as a shoulder recharger. But try to let your hands relax. All that excess holding that we put on the hands can be pretty fatiguing. We'll give ourselves just another 20 seconds here. Now, when you're ready, hands slide back in front of us. We'll pull ourselves forward, 2 hands in knees, tabletop. Splay the fingers out wide, really get those fingerprints active once again. Curl our toes, lift our seat. We'll find a down dog. As you get into that down dog, energize down to the fingerprints once again. Try to get the middle of the back to really expand out. And then let's pedal into our heels a little bit. A little bit longer down dog hold than is typical for our recharge classes, but let's find some posterior chain length. And then when you feel good, we'll lift our awareness to the front of the mat, walk ourselves forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let the body just melt over the lower half, right? Torso melts over the legs. And we get as long as we can from the sacrum all the way to the top of the head. Use that cervical spine length that we started class with. And then let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. We're going to do the hardest thing we do today, which is come to mountain in a recharge class. In the top of this shape, get the spine tall, squeeze into the glutes, squeeze into the core, create that mid-body stability. Bring the hands together at heart center. Let the eyes close. And just feel as stable and tall as we can create ourselves here. Then interlace the fingers. So just that subtle little shift to the finger placement. See if I can get to a place where you can feel. And you can wrap around the hands. And from heart center, we're just going to push the arms straight up and overhead. So the biceps come up towards the ears. There's a little tendency for the low back to want to go forward. Hug the hips back. Squeeze the belly in nice and taut. And then release the hands, palms down behind your head so that the fingers can go wide, or the heel of the hands can go wide, but the fingers stay interlaced. It's a better way to describe that. And then inhale, and we'll come right back up and overhead. And exhale the hands to heart center. Fingers can unwind here so that we go to a traditional heart center alignment. Interlace the fingers, fingers splay, shift and inhale, arms up, biceps towards the ears. Exhale, hands behind you, so the heels of the hands can go out wide, but fingers stay interlaced. Squeeze the elbows back without allowing the belly to go forward. And then inhale, reach your arms up. Turn the palms towards the front of the room and exhale through, forward, fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands, walk yourself back into down dog. As you come into that down dog alignment, this will be our last down dog. So this is our last real challenge of the day, or at least of the practice. And just get yourself the heel energy from the finger mounds to the heels of your feet. And then we'll come down to hands and knees, tabletop. Sink back into child's pose. And settle here. Be here for about 20 more seconds. Now, when you're right, stay with the torso in child's pose. Slide your hands so they're underneath the shoulders. So the hands are pretty close. Forehead kind of becomes a point of balance here. Then press down into your left hand and try to drive your left arm towards straight. You can even turn your gaze towards the left. As you do that, the right shoulder comes down. And as the right shoulder comes down, we get some lumbar soft tissue expansion. So we're just pressing so that the left arm can come straight. As the left arm comes straight, low back on the right side of the body starts to elongate. Then relax, head comes back to neutral if you rotated. And we'll do the same thing to the second side. Push into that right arm. Try to straighten that right arm. There's a little rotation through the torso. As the torso rotates, we get a little left low back expansion. You can even turn the head. And we'll come back to neutral. Walk the arms straight out in front of us. And then walk your hands, both hands, over to the left side of your mat. And as we go over that left side of the mat, we get that right side body expansion once again, just like when we were pressing into our left arm. Except the expansion is more on the lateral edge. It also tends to manifest a little bit higher. So we get some of this lat space. And we'll walk ourselves back to neutral. And let's do the same thing over to the right side. Left side of the body expands, get that full length, full room, full expansiveness. And we'll come back to neutral. Now walk both hands back over to the left, and this time roll your right palm up and stack your left hand on top of it. So the hands come together like prayer hands. And again, you can rotate the head, likely a necessity to rotate the head to keep that right arm available. And now we get on that lateral edge of the shoulder structure. Start to feel into some length, even higher into the torso. You can flip the right hand back over, walk ourselves back to neutral, and then we'll walk over to the right. And as you land on the right, flip the left hand, place the right hand right on top. Anchoring here from the hips and elongating into the shoulder. When you feel balanced side to side, you can flip that left hand, walk back to neutral, and we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Hands and knees tabletop. Let's extend our legs forward. We'll end up in a staff pose. Spine is tall. Legs can be extended. They can also be bent, whatever feels most appropriate for you. And we're going to follow into a forward fold. And then just kind of lock in the idea of where you're comfortable in your forward fold. Pay attention to how the legs sit, pay attention to how the back feels, how the shoulders feel, and lock in that idea of comfortable. And we'll walk ourselves back up towards staff, vertical spine. And we're going to grab our blanket. And if we have it, blanket towel. And if we have it, a block book. Goal here is going to be to create a stack that is supportive of the fold we were just in, without having any of the tension. So we're going to get into that same depth, but have a support underneath us. So know where you were, right? Remember that lock in, remember that sensation, and then build a prop stack that feels supportive of that space. So that can be rolled blanket, it can be stacked on end blanket, it can be a blanket with a block, it can be a block with a blanket. Any combination that gives you the opportunity to get into a fold that feels supportive. So we take any of the potential frustration of the shape away. That's our goal. And the block can be on the forehead, it can be on the sternum, it can be in the belly. You can still bend the knees. Remember, all those things are accessible to you. So there's this man who is nearing the end of his time. Enough towards the end that he's been placed in a hospice facility. And he's been in the facility for a week or so. And he's been very, very unhappy the entirety of the time. He's been pleasant, he's been kind, but he's also clearly been unhappy. And the staff starts to ask him, what's, obviously there are some things, but what can we do to make your experience better? And he says, you guys come in every hour and check on me, and that's 5 minutes of connection, but I don't have any family. I don't have any visitors. All of my friends have gone. I would love to have more human connection. And that's not really within their menu of choices. So they kind of take that and they kind of note it. And then they move to the next room. In the next room, there's a man who has also been relatively grumpy, even in terms in relation to the rest of the occupants. And they ask him the same question, is there anything we could do? And he has this same answer. My friends are gone. I don't have any family. I don't have any visitors. You guys come in once an hour. You spend 5 minutes with me, but that isn't fulfilling my human connection wants. And the staff going back to back, they're just like, okay, well, we can make these two happy quite easily. better quite easily. And the next day they're moved into the same room. And 5 minutes later, they start talking. We'll be here for another 60 seconds. Remember, we're trying to take the ease into this shape. We're trying to take the tension out of this shape. So if you're feeling tension starting to build, bend the knees more, adjust the props more, find a way where you can be more supported, even as the depth of the shape may increase. Last 10 seconds here. And you're right. When you're ready, let's walk ourselves back to a vertical spine. And we will set those props to the side for a moment. And let's take the knees and bend both of them. And then hook your hands underneath the hamstrings so that you can grab kind of on that inner thigh space and let the knees fall out wide. But your hands are holding here. With the hands holding, but not necessarily lifting, just offering a little support, let your torso come forward. If it's accessible to you, you can take those hands out and grab the inner ankle. If that's not accessible and this doesn't feel comfortable, you could wrap around the outside of the thighs and to the outside of the ankle to give a little bit more support. Whatever feels appropriate here. And then reconnect to the cervical spine. Think about what we did those first rotations in that first chin tuck and try to extend the cervical spine to neutral. So we're not tucking the chin, we're not lifting the chin, but we're trying to find that place where we can create some length or we can ease back into that length we did create. And we're going to be here for 35 more seconds. Last 10 seconds here. We will walk ourselves or bring ourselves back up to a vertical spine and lower ourselves onto our back. Settling in and allowing for this integration. This is probably my favorite portion of class. It is the transition from more vertical shapes to horizontal, where the spine can be greeted by the mat and we can really feel into all the work we've done. So we'll give ourselves just about 15 more seconds here to integrate. And then we are going to go from my favorite portion of class to my favorite twist. So just playing the hits for me today. We're going to take our right ankle across our left thigh and then drop the left thigh down to the mat. As that happens, the right foot is planted on the mat and the right knee is pointed towards the ceiling. The tibia fibia is nearly vertical or is vertical-esque. It may not be fully vertical, but we settle into this twist. Now, this twist has a couple of pretty big asks for the body. It has a big ask of the right hip flexor, and it has a big ask of the lumbar and thoracic rotation. That right shoulder is working towards neutral. So elbow, back of hand, and right shoulder all flat if we can get there. If we can't get there, you can maybe slide one of those props underneath that elbow to help support the right arm, right side body, and help accentuate the rotation. And we'll just settle into a nice fluid breath here. So these two men, now roommates in this hospice center, start talking, and they ask each other their names. The first one says, my name's Barry. And the second one says, my name's Steve. And they start asking each other questions. One of them asks the other his birth date. Turns out they're both born on June 3rd. And it's this immediate kinship after the very first question, right? They find out they share a birthday. They've been put in the same room to end their lives. And they feel immediately bonded and connected. And Steve asked Barry to share his life story. And so he starts, I'm born on June 3rd. And I did these advanced elementary school experiences. And then I was in AP classes in high school. And I was offered scholarships all around the country. And Steve is listening and his eyes widen a little bit. He was like, that sounds exactly like my experience. And Barry says, well, yeah, I turned down all those scholarships though. I ended up making a decision to join the Peace Corps. And Steve is like, whoa, I had to turn down all my scholarships. I was forced to by my parents to join the Peace Corps. Barry says, wow, that is, pretty unbelievable that we've shared these experiences. And they start talking about where they were. And they traveled all over the world with this group, but they were just a month apart. So they were getting moved every month to different portions of the world, and they would have been in the exact same spot, but they were in the exact same spot, just a month difference. And they're just they are getting along in a way that is hard to believe. Two people that were strangers 30 minutes ago have now shared more in common than they could have ever imagined. Last 45 seconds here in this deep twist, side one. And when you're right, we draw that right leg back across and drop it so that it can mirror the left. And just give a little rotation here, a little sway side to side with the knees. And then eventually we'll come back to neutral. And we'll take that left ankle across our right thigh. And we'll drop that left or that right thigh to the mat. Left foot comes down to the floor mat as well. And then the left knee points roughly straight towards the ceiling. They may not be perfectly straight. That tibia and fibia may have a slight angle to them. But we're really working to keep that knee up. That helps keep the accentuation point on the hip flexor. Helps us have the capacity to lift our knees a little bit higher. So we need to step over things or move. And we'll just settle in here once again for this deep twist. So the two continue talking, and Barry keeps sharing his story. He says, after 4 years traveling the world in the Peace Corps, I came back home and I sat down and I really thought about what was next. I had all this experience. I had the opportunity to start a business, but I thought that the best thing to do was to go to school. So I reapplied to all these places that accepted me, and I got accepted into an Ivy League school. And Steve says, I came back and I wanted to start a business. I was dead set on starting a business, but my parents told me that I needed to go to school. So I too applied to all the schools I went to, and I got accepted into an Ivy League school. And they end up a couple 100 miles apart, right? Princeton, Harvard. So kind of living in the same climate, certainly living in a very similar academic environment. And Barry just talks about how much he loved the academic experience and how he was really grateful that he had separated some time between high school and going to higher education, because he felt like he was more ready and available. And Steve has a pretty different experience. He says, hey, I got my degree, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So it was a sludge. It was a tough road, basically the entirety of the way. But again, their experiences are so similar. They can relate to one another's college experience nearly perfectly. And they still had some differences of opinions of what that experience was like and how meaningful it was. After graduating from college, they both end up starting businesses. And they start businesses in the same industry, making metal alloys for use in all types of applications. About 80 more seconds here. And Barry explains how he got really excited about the potentials of metal alloys when he was in college. And Steve says, I got into metal alloys because that was the business my parents were in. And after I graduated college, my dad wanted to retire. My mom wanted to retire, so they handed the business to me. And it was so profitable that I couldn't not do it, but never really fulfilled me. And Barry starts talking about all of the exciting things he did in his metal alloy business, how these new mixtures were used in all types of different industries and how they change the potential of different industries. And then the two go off on kind of a tangent about metal alloys. They have incredible amounts of knowledge about this very obscure industry. And talk that through for hours. When you're right, when you're ready, bringing that left leg back across and letting the left foot come down so that it can mirror the right, and working into a little rotation. A little sway side to side. Now let's eventually bring our knees back to neutral. We are going to grab the most block-like shape we have. So that may be a towel or blanket folded up in the shape of a block. It may be a book. It may be a block itself, whatever it is, the most block-like shape we have. And we're going to slide that underneath our tailbone. So lifting the belt line up and just coming into a bridge. And as you settle into this bridge, I want you to pay attention to the structure of the lumbar spine. So there's a lot of openness. We've opened the soft tissue. We started out opening the soft tissue from the very base of class. And we've opened up the spinal column stack itself in that last twist. I want you to feel the low back relaxing into the bridge. Now, you can adjust the height, right? You can fold your blanket more. You can tilt your block. If you have a book, you could stack the blanket on top of the book to make it higher. But you don't need to go for a lot of height here. What we're looking for is a place where our low back can relax. So finding the appropriate depth and then letting the body sink into the appropriate depth. Arms can come out towards cactus. They can be down by your sides. Try to keep your knees, your ankles, your calcaneus bone, and your femoral head. So middle of the hips, middle of the knees, middle of the ankle, middle of the foot, all in one line. Two lines, I guess, would be better to describe that, but in line with one another. And just ease into this shape. So they start talking more about their lives, and basically, a couple years after I got into the alloy industry, I met my wife. Steve chimes in and says, a couple years after I got into the alloy industry, I met the woman who became my wife too. Barry starts talking about how much he loved and appreciated his wife. Gone now, but such an impactful portion of his life. And Steve says, I never really felt connected to my wife. Interesting enough. Barry's like, well, why'd you end up marrying her? And he's like, well, it just felt like the right thing to do. We were at the appropriate age. We were in the appropriate financial space. And she said she was going to leave if I didn't marry her, so I did. Settling low back into this shape. The exhale portion of the breath. Think about all the potential in the exhale portion of the breath. We oftentimes take for granted the exhale portion because it is passive. Right? The exhale portion of the breath happens as long as we take the inhale the exhale happens. And that is 100% true. Right? The exhale portion of our breath will be the final portion of our breath that we ever take. It is a passive experience as long as we take an inhale. But if we pay attention to the backside, the exhale portion, there's a ton of opportunity for expansion there. Just as there is opportunity for expansion on the inhale, there is opportunity for expansion on the exhale. Focus into releasing into that expansion here for the next about 40 seconds. All right, when you are ready, push into the heels and toe mounds, lift your belt line up into a bridge high enough to remove that block, set that block to the side. We come back down into this opportunity to feel the work we've done, the integration of the work we've done into our physical body. Give yourself just 15 more seconds to integrate. And then both knees are going to fall over to the left. And we'll stack the hips here. So bring that right knee forward just a touch. Now you can stay right here, or if it's accessible to you, you can extend that right leg to help accentuate the twist. The left hand can even grab the ankle, the heel, the hamstring of that right leg to help accentuate this twist. And then release your right arm back into cactus or maybe half T. And we'll do this last little bit of deep twisting here. We're going to hold this shape for another 60 seconds. You can offer a rotation of your head. It can go towards the left or it can go towards the right if the cervical spine has the room. That left knee is staying bent here. So if we are extending the right leg, it can be straight or towards straight, but the left knee is staying bent so that we have the capacity to lengthen into some posterior chain on the right side. Oftentimes when we do this twist, we'll have that bottom leg extended. And when you're right, the right leg works back so that both knees can point towards the feeling, both feet flat against your mat. One more, well, another opportunity to integrating a really deep twist here with some posterior chain length. And then when you do feel integrated, when you feel like you are ready, we'll take this aside too. Both knees fall over towards the right. We stack the hips and then the left leg extends and your right leg can help to accentuate this twist. You can grab the foot, the ankle, the calf, whatever feels right. And then the left arm opens towards maybe cactus or maybe half T. Last 20 seconds here. And when it feels right within you, coming back to neutral. Bottoms of the feet back on the mat, giving yourself the opportunity here for the last time to integrate the work we've done. And then when you feel right and ready, let's let our eyes close and our awareness drift within us. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want, anything you might need before we fully settle into Shavasana. Remember that you have those props available. You can prop up the hips. You can use the blanket for warmth. You can use the blanket as a roll underneath the spine or the neck, whatever feels appropriate. Offer that. And then eventually there's going to come a time when you're ready to drift into Shavasana. Allow that to happen. Allow your body to be received here and settle here, be nourished here. So these two continue talking, and their lives are mirror images of each other. Now, they're not exact mirror images, but they are as mirror imaged as you could imagine two strangers ever being. The only consistent difference is that Barry has consciously chosen, created the path that he's followed. And Steve's path, again, nearly identical. Similar experiences financially, similar experiences socially, similar experiences, and similar is probably not even strong enough a word. Nearly identical experiences. But Steve's path has more or less just come to him, just happened to him. And as they continue to talk, they continue to get more and more excited. And without knowing it, the kind of covered up by the excitement, the remaining energy in their bodies start to drain. When you're right, when you're ready, drifting into this ease of Shavasana. Eventually, the expenditure of energy hits them both at essentially the exact same time. And they look at each other and they say, it's really been nice getting to know you, but I think I have to go now. They both turn their head so that it points up at the ceiling. And again, in unison at the exact same time, Gary, who's created and crafted this conscious life experience, says, it's been a wonderful life. And I wouldn't change a single thing. And at the same time, Steve looks up at the same ceiling, living a nearly identical life. If I could, I would do it all over again. And they take their final breath, the exhale portion leaves their body, and time has run out for both of them. Start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes. To your wrists and your ankles. To your elbows and your knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck and head. Eventually, we will bring enough movement throughout our body that we can transition from the seat we are in, from the shape we are in, back into a seat so that we can be in the seat we are in. And let your shoulders get broad, breath get fluid, eyes close. And it feels right for you. We'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you be less worried about the actual decisions you make? More concerned with how consciously you craft them, and just see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday. Happy December. Appreciate the heck out of you guys. I'm going to be back tomorrow night if you want to move around a little bit more. If not, we'll do this again next Sunday. I love the heck out of you. See you soon. Mwah.